Welcome to Simcha, a celebration of life. I'm your host, Eitan Berger. Rabbi Judah Loeb ben Bezalel, widely known as the Maharal of Prague, or simply the Maharal, was an important Talmudic scholar, Jewish mystic, and philosopher who, for most of his life, served as a leading rabbi in the cities of Mikulov, Moravia, and Prague in Bohemia during the 15th century. In our new series with Rabbi Ramon Widmonte, we explore the life and teachings of the Maharal.
The Maharal was born in an area which today we would know as part of Poland or Czechoslovakia. There's a discussion around where he was born, either in Poznan, which is in Poland, or in Worms. And we know very, very little about his early life. In fact, we have no knowledge of where he studied, who his teachers were. The Maharal comes from a lineage of great scholars. And his name is an interesting acronym. Many of our great sages, their names are acronyms. So the Maharal stands for Morenu Harav Lu, or Lo. I mean, my German's not that good. But the word Lo, German, means lion. And that's more or less where we get his surname from. And many of his works, in fact, reflect this almost lionistic lineage, either in the titles, mostly in the titles, in fact. And his first name was Yehuda. And Yehuda, Judah, in the blessing that Jacob gives to the tribe of Judah, is also compared to a lion. So this almost becomes a symbol of much of what he does. And truly, he becomes a lion. Courageous, bold, unflinching, a leader of tremendous sway over the whole Jewish world. And to a certain extent, that powerful personality, even, it was such an incredibly powerful Torah personality, outweighed the immediate effect that people had from learning his Torah. And that is just a small mark of who he was. And there are not that many people who are, on the one hand, incredible sages, writing profound Torah, teaching so many students, but at the other hand, become communal leaders of such gravitas that effect almost sways everybody's perception around them of who that person is. And that really was the Maharal. He was born either in 1512 or 1520 or 1522, which gives you an idea of how little we actually know about his original early life. And he married in 1544. He married the daughter of a guy called the rich guy, Shmelka, the rich guy, and her name was Pearl. For whatever reason, either through inheriting wealth from his father or from wealth from his father-in-law, the Maharal became independently wealthy. And this sets the scene for almost everything that follows. Coupled with his incredible honesty and integrity, he's just never beholden to any purse, any rich person, any community for his daily bread. And he feels free to lead the Jewish people along a path which he feels is the most principled. And he does this without fear or favor, even to his own personal and his personal detriment, and his reputation and his ability to influence the Jewish people. He weighs up with the work that he's able to achieve, but invariably he will choose the principled path. He started his first position in 1553 in Nikolsburg, and he gains a reputation not just as an incredibly sage teacher, but he gains a reputation as an administrator, and he reorganizes all of the communal life around him. And he becomes the person who comes up with structures for managing the tzedakah, the charity to the poor, and all of the communal structures, the legal systems, and he reorganizes them in a far better system. And the reputation he gains from this is so profound that around the area, and then further and further, people are coming to him not just to ask him questions of Torah, of which we unfortunately don't have that many remaining, but we do know that he was a primary source for Torah knowledge and an issuer of responsa on halachic issues. But they ask him, how do we run the community? What do you think of this policy? What do you think of that policy? And he becomes renowned for his ability to administer community affairs and create the structures for administering community affairs with efficiency, integrity, honesty, checks, safety, checks and balances and so on. And that's where his reputation begins to grow. He becomes undisputed as the Torah leader par excellence in the area. But he also becomes, it's also undisputed that he has the sharpest, straightest tongue and heart of anybody around. He just doesn't mince his words. And of course, for many of the influential people around, when they're weighing up whether or not they're going to get this guy as a rabbi, they're thinking to themselves, well, you know, I can't control him. If I've threatened to fire him, he won't care because he's independently wealthy, and I have no hold on him. What will he do if we appoint him? And this almost becomes a theme for the Maharal's work and his career.
The Maharal's tomb in Prague is decorated with a heraldic shield featuring a lion with two intertwined tails, alluding both to his name and to Bohemia, the arms of which has a two-tailed lion. Within the world of Torah and Talmudic scholarship, the Maharal of Prague is known for his works on Jewish philosophy and Jewish mysticism, and his work Gur Aryeh al-HaTorah, a super commentary on Rashi's Torah commentary.
The Maharal starts reorganizing the education system, and he goes out an all-out attack on what he views as a corrupt education system, which doesn't seek to actually empower young Jews to become fully literate in Torah, but really seeks to create an elite of people who play games with, quote-unquote, play games with Torah, and where it becomes almost an academic, a means of academic bravado or academic pride, where you can show how clever you are, as opposed to actually engaging with Torah deeply. And he really has the tremendous backing of many people around because he's been successful, and his vision is so incisive. And he begins this idea that really we should be educating the young in stages, beginning with the youngest ages, and this is really according to one of the Mishnayot, one of the Mishnahs in Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, that one should begin initially educating children in Tanakh, the Bible, and then moving on from there to Mishnah, and then only after several years of study in this area to move on to Talmud, to move on to the mainstay of Jewish education at that stage, which was Gemara, the Talmud. And that was not what was being practiced at the time. And the Maharal struggles against this for many, many years. And in this area, he actually has a slow but tremendous success. Many people know of the custom these days to spend a lot of time learning Mishnah. Often people do this in memory of someone who's passed away. Much of this begins with the Maharal. In fact, one of his students, Rabbi Yom Tov Lipman Heller, writes a commentary on the Mishnah, which is printed as a standard today in most of the editions of the Mishnah. It's called the Tosfot Yom Tov. And he actually is one of the Maharal's students. And this burgeoning trend to spend time just learning Mishnah as a standalone begins from the Maharal. And in many places in the world today, and particularly people who come from the Telz tradition, and also today in Israel, in many of the school systems, they've adopted this method of teaching kids in stages, building slowly in an incremental fashion from the Bible, Tanakh, then to Mishnah, the first stage of oral law, and then eventually to the Gemara. Eventually, we're talking now the late 50s, 90s, the guys in Prague say, look, no, we can't beat him. He's just this power. And the Maharal now, if he's born in 1512, he's now in his 80s. And they say to him, okay, you know, no strings attached. Please be our rabbi. And he becomes the chief rabbi of Prague. And we know him as the Maharal of Prague, but the reality is that this is the last 10 years of his life. He dies in 1604, having had daughters and one son. His son actually predeceases him. It's very tragic, in 1600. And his lineage is carried on through his daughters and their husbands and their children. And he dies close to, by all accounts, close to 100 years old, having impacted the communities around him from a multifaceted point of view. He's looked at redefining the way that people looked at the very concept of Torah study, at the fabric of the social life of Jews at the time. The one thing I think I do need to deal with is, and not that I have any particular need to debunk myths, is the idea of the golem. If a person knows much about the Maharal, it's inevitable that the first thing that they will say is that the Maharal built a golem. What is a golem? A golem is some type of automaton created out of clay with mystical procedures, fusing the clay with God's name so that it's animated and becomes almost a clay slave. And the myth goes that the Maharal created this in order to protect the Jews from anti-Semitic attacks at the time. The reality is that although this might be attractive to kids, the Maharal's real impact goes far beyond this, and his Torah and his leadership and his impact really is in the area of the Jewish soul and in the way that we live. I think also what one needs to understand is that the Czechoslovakian people themselves have actually become enamored of this myth, and it's become part of their folklore. In fact, a major driver of this whole golem myth doesn't come from Jewish sources, but actually comes from non-Jewish sources. The Czechs have built a statue to the Maharal. If you go to the new town hall, they've got a statue outside of the Maharal. They've put him on their postal stamps. He's become a figure in Czech law, in their folklore, and part of it is due to a play that was written in the 1800s about the golem, and it sort of spread outward from there. I think obviously it was comforting for the Jewish people to actually think that there were sages who could possibly protect them in this way through the construction of basically clay bouncers who would stop blood libels and so on and so forth. But it probably has been culled from the Czech folklore and things that the Czechs were enamored about regarding their interaction with the Maharal. And it also probably dates to 1593, when their emperor Rudolf actually asked and arranged for an audience with the Maharal. Many of the monarchs at that stage were engaged with or interested in the occult and things like magic and alchemy. And for that reason, they often sought some sort of input from our sages on Kabbalah, on Jewish mysticism. And the Maharal was a past master of all branches of Jewish learning, including mysticism. And we don't have a record of what they discussed, but apparently that was the topic of discussion. And that probably is also part of the source of the myths that the Kabbalah was implemented by the Maharal, because that really was a focus of even the non-Jewish attitude towards him and Torah.
In our final episode of our series, Raising Your Child with Soul, Slovie Jungreis Wolff explains to us that losing control of one's home leads to losing control of one's family. And today, she gives us some guidance in gaining control back in the home.
Have to be solution-oriented as a parent. Some parents just throw up their hands and they say, you know, it's impossible. These kids are impossible. The house is impossible. I can't. And you lose control of your home, and your home becomes a sitcom. I've had many parents tell me, my home is a sitcom. I don't know what to do. If I don't want to be in this home, the children don't want to be in this home, and we lose control. Take control back of your home. Now, how do I do that? Number one, be solution-oriented. What does that mean? Look for the trigger. When is the moment of the day that we lose most control, and why? Is there a certain child who cannot sit at the table for this amount of time? Or these two children together are not a good combination? Is it me as a parent? Do I come home very, very stressed and every little thing sets me off? Then I have to figure that out, and I have to ask myself, before I walk through the door, let me take a few moments. Do you know that that's one of the reasons why we have a mezuzah on our door, and we're supposed to stop a moment before we enter our home and give it a kiss? Because you pause before you come into your home, and you realize this is a place of sanctity and holiness. I can't lose myself. I have to really keep that goal in mind, to know that this has to be a haven. If I'm a screaming parent, let me resolve today. Let me stop the screaming, because nothing was ever accomplished from screaming. and work on my tone. Now, does that mean that tonight I will stop screaming forever? No. But if one time I scream less, I empower myself. And one time becomes 2 times, and 2 times become 4 times. And the whole atmosphere in our home becomes different because there's less screaming. Do I call my children names? Do I humiliate them? Do I embarrass them? Because when that happens, I'm not disciplining. We think that when I criticize, I'm disciplining. Criticism is not disciplining. To say to a child, why do you always fight with your sister? Why do you always forget your homework? That's not discipline. Discipline means I give my child a solution. Criticism is just belittling a child. So I really have to look at myself, and there's a whole chapter in my book on discipline. I create obstacles to good discipline without realizing it. And I may have the best intentions and the best thoughts, but I'm not getting my message across. And I must ask why. What is my mistake here? Why do I feel as if I'm talking to a wall? Because that should never be in a home. We are raising the most spoiled generation who ever lived. And parents will deny themselves in order to keep giving and showering to their children, and their children grow up with such great expectations so that it's never enough. It's never enough. And the arrogance that comes out, and the disrespect, and the lack of gratitude. So the first chapter in my book is how to raise children with an attitude of gratitude, because that must be the bedrock of every single home. Without gratitude, you stop appreciating and cherishing what you have. That's where the disrespect comes from, the entitlement. Stop giving things. Start giving time. That's the mistake that we make. And an unhappy child does not mean that I am not a good mother. Children need boundaries, they need borders to feel secure. So we're not BFFs, we're not best friends. There must be respect, there must be communication. And then there is a love and trust between parent and child. But just showering toys and giving, that doesn't create a child with character. Don't be afraid. Have courage to sometimes say no. That's the strength of being a good mother and a good father. People make a mistake and they don't realize how crucial women are to the Jewish people. But the future of the Jewish people really relies on the strength of the woman in the home, because the whole home is really based on the wisdom of the woman, how she brings Shabbos into the home, how committed she is, how she raises the children, and usually men follow the lead of the women. So God gave women a gift called Bina, which means a deeper understanding. And it's a way that we can see a situation and not just see it at the surface, but we go for the depth of it. We see beyond the moment. And if women can see beyond the moment, then we can say to ourselves, I'm not just being a mom here. I'm raising the future of our people. I'm not just settling a squabble between children. I'm teaching the next generation how to forgive, how to be kind. There's so much that relies on the strength and courage of women to look beyond ourselves. And that's hard to do, to look beyond ourselves, because we're tired sometimes and we're stressed sometimes. But if we focus on the goal, it really empowers us, because we know that in the merit of righteous women, our sages came out of Egypt. And our sages teach us, in the merit of righteous women, our people came out of Egypt. So our sages teach us that in the future, women will have that same role, to bring geula, to bring redemption to the people.
In Judaism, the sanctuary lamp is known by its Hebrew name Ner Tamid, which is usually translated as eternal flame or eternal light. Hanging in front of the ark in every Jewish synagogue, it is meant to represent the menorah of the temple in Jerusalem, as well as the continuously burning fire on the altar of burnt offerings in front of the temple. In our series, The Temple and Today, Rabbi Liebenberg explains the origins of this lamp.
If you were in the temple in Jerusalem and you were standing in front of the parochet, that beautiful curtain in front of the Holy of Holies, you would have on your left-hand side, on the southern side, a beautiful candelabra. This was called the menorah. The menorah was made out of solid gold, and it had 7 lamps. And every single day, a kohen, a priest, would come in and would light these lamps. And according to our tradition, miraculously, one of these lamps never went out. Exactly which one of the lamps it was is an argument in the Talmud. According to one opinion, it was the very central lamp. According to another opinion, it was the second lamp, which is referred to as the Ner Ma'aravi, the western lamp. But it was there all of the time miraculously. And the Talmud says, what was the point of this? What was the symbolism of this? It was to tell us that God's presence is always there. The Talmud asks a fundamental question. Why does Hashem ask for us to light a menorah in the temple? Does He need our light? He is the one that created light. He is the light to the world. So why do we have to light a little lamp for Him? It's a pointless exercise. And the Talmud says, no, it's not that we are lighting a lamp for God to provide illumination. It's rather for us to realize that God's presence is always there. And therefore that one lamp of the menorah was known as the Ner Tamid, the eternal flame, to remind us that Hashem is always with us. And it's very interesting that the first time that Hashem appeared to Moshe, He appeared to him in a burning bush. The bush was burning, but it wasn't consumed. What was the idea? Hashem was saying, I'm always with you. Imo anochi betzara. Even when you go through a difficult time and you feel that I'm not there, but I'm always there. My flame is always burning. Now, we said that every single shul in the world is modeled after the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. So just as in the Holy Temple of Jerusalem, as you stood just beyond the parochet, you would find the menorah with the eternal lamp, so in every single shul in the world, in front of the parochet, in front of the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, is hanging a light. It's very interesting that this detail is not mentioned anywhere in the Code of Jewish law, but nevertheless the Jewish people have always fulfilled it faithfully, to remind themselves of the temple, to remind themselves of the fact that Hashem's presence is always there. It is a lamp that is always burning brightly.
In Ethics of Our Fathers, or Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, verse 14, Rabbi Elazar would say, be diligent in the study of Torah. Know what to answer a heretic, and know before whom you toil, and who is your employer, God, who will repay you the reward of your labors. We've come to the end of this week's episode of Simcha. Thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to be in touch with us, please find us on Facebook at Spirit Sister Productions and drop us a line. From myself, Eitan Berger, and the whole team here at Simcha, have a great week and goodbye.